The views expressed and opinions given by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Z-Talk Radio, its affiliates, or sponsors.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Warren Exchange.
I am Dracula. I bid you welcome.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm your host, Al Warren, and tonight we're thrilled to have Magus Peter H. Gilmore of the Church of Satan joining us, talk about the church, theories, ideas, just a good exchange here tonight. And it comes up right after these words.
Are you sitting out there lonely and feeling left out? Do you want to be included in the world of the paranormal, but really don't know how? We have the paranormal solution for you. Call us at 1-800-RENT-A-GHOST. We can deliver everything from a timid spirit that walks the halls or one that simply opens a cabinet door. Or you can get a feisty poltergeist that can trash your house and really liven things up. We can get you as many shadow people as you need to have a party. Do you have too many unwanted friends or family just barging in? Our screaming and wailing banshee will guarantee that after hearing some deafening anguish, they will never return. Impress your friends or take revenge with a specter of death hovering over your dinner table or theirs. Or, if you're lonely, you might like a simple attachment that follows you everywhere. EVPs? Choose from our line of celebrity voices. What investigator would not want to hear Jim Morrison or Whitney Houston? Or maybe Michael Jackson or Kurt Cobain? Order now and get 3 free orbs. We are 1-800-RENT-A-GHOST. Not responsible for damage caused by poltergeist activity, divorce, loss of job, sleep deprivation, bedwetting, uncontrolled vomiting, suicide, or the possibility of being hospitalized for insanity. And most important, there will be no returns.
Bud Light presents Real Men of Genius.
Real Men of Genius.
Today we salute you, Mr. In-the-Car Nose Picker.
Mr. In-the-Car Nose Picker.
For you, the daily commute isn't simply a drive to the office. It's a hands-on exploration deep into your schnoz.
I'm going in now.
With pinpoint accuracy and sheer determination, you dig for boogers like miners dig for gold.
Hit the jackpot.
And why do you do it? 'Cause the windows are up and you think we can't see you. We can.
How you doing?
So crack open an ice cold Bud Light, oh nabber of the nose nugget. We'd like to shake your hand, but you'll have to wash it first.
Mr. In-the-Car Nose Picker.
Bud Light Beer, Anheuser-Busch, St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay, now we're back, and joining us is Peter H. Gilmore from the Church of Satan, and I really appreciate you coming on tonight.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's so as I was saying to you earlier, I kind of heard you in a interview once, and it sort of really brought to attention a lot of things that I've heard about the church, and realized that it's not necessarily true. Like what you were saying was completely different. So I had to have you on because I know I have a lot of listeners, and I've heard a lot of the different points of view, and so I thought, let's go to the source and let's talk to you and find out what it's really about.
Always the best approach.
Yeah, go direct and find out, and then no beating around the bush. Church of Satan. So what is that? I know that's a really big question, I guess, or broad. But
we have books on that.
yeah, let's go over the book. No, let's. Yeah. I thought. Okay, well, let's. How about the basic? What's the fundamental of the church? Is it like?
Yeah, I'll cover that. Essentially, Anton LaVey founded us in 1966, and his background was that of a showman. He was in carnivals and circuses, and he also did police photography, and he was usually shooting crime scenes, kind of like Ouija before him. And he got to see really the essential nature of man, which he saw as being a beast. Just like all the rest, but sometimes more vicious and worse than the ones that walk on all fours. And so he felt that humanity really had this wonderfully wide range of ability to be tragic and awful and criminal, to being heroic and creative and magnificent. And he really didn't find any philosophy that encapsulated mankind in a realistic way. So he looked to Satan as the symbol of mankind and its potential. And so he adopted that. So he created a philosophy called Satanism. And of course, Satan means adversary, opposer, and accuser in Hebrew. So he's standing up as the opposer and accuser to all of the spiritual religions of the world and saying, enough of that. This is not really germane to our species. We need something that's going to fit us. So his philosophy was an atheist philosophy, and Satan was employed as a symbol of pride and liberty and individualism. And he approached this as a pragmatic, skeptical, and materialist perspective, not one that has any kind of spirituality at all. In fact, he called Satanism the world's first carnal religion because it rejected spirituality entirely. So there's no faith in Satanism, and there's no looking to other worlds. It's very much about being in the here and now, living fully. He felt that he needed to create a philosophy, too, that challenged the people who were in it to take responsibility for themselves. Each Satanist creates his own hierarchy of values, and that's quite a challenge for most people, because most people would rather have that handed to them from some guru of some sort, whether it be a spiritual guru or a political guru or whatever kind. A lot of people are directed in many ways by forces around them, but it's the rare individual who says, I'm going to take command of my own life and be the captain of my destiny and really take responsibility for my choices and my behaviors. Because when you do that, when you fail, it's on your head, and you have to deal with that. And that's something that in this culture, especially I find with younger people, they want to blame everybody else for anything that's not going right in their lives. Not that that's been not part of earlier culture, but certainly I think these days it's even more part of the way people act. They just, it's everybody else's fault, not theirs. And Satanism stands against that. So it was a way of really creating a very grounded materialist approach, and but being open-minded too, because the whole point to understanding the world around us is using reason and science, but not closing our minds to potentials of really fascinating things, because there's all kinds of evidence out there, and especially when you look at things that we call paranormal, we would call them supernormal as Satanists, because they're part of the full existence that we have. They're not outside of it, but they're just perhaps more unusually experienced.
So you guys, so you're pretty open to paranormal aspects, like ghosts or spirits or past lives and UFOs and all that?
Well, we think you have to investigate all of that and really be very critical about the evidence being presented. And sadly, a lot of it doesn't hold up very well. There are some interesting things with ghosts, that come up. And I think for me, what I've noticed that seems to be something that is consistent is that ghosts seem to play like a residue of something from somebody's life, but they're not a conscious survival of life. If people were really having regular interactions with ghosts and conversing with them, then I think the world would be a very different place. You wouldn't just be hearing some weird phrase here or there, or some strange sound that you're trying to interpret as a word, but you could be having conversations with Galileo or Beethoven, and sadly that's not going on. So I don't think that that's really the way it works. That the ghost phenomenon may just be a kind of, as you might call it, a psychic residue of some sort. That's perhaps some extreme emotional situation left that. How it left it on the fabric of existence for certain perceptive people to get, we don't know yet. We don't understand all of physics. We're still trying to figure things out with quantum entanglement and the idea that things at great distances might be linked, and we don't even know how that works yet. It's still a great part of theoretical science. We have a lot to learn before we really understand the fabric of the universe.
Yeah, there's still a lot of questions out there. A lot of questions.
Oh, and there always will be. We are fairly limited, our species, and we're the species on Earth that's asking, that we know of anyway, that's asking questions about these kind of things. And it may be, we may never know anywhere near close to all of the answers. And I think we have to accept that, but never stop asking the questions. I think that quest, the ongoing search for knowledge, is a very important part of being human and being alive.
Yeah. So now, how did you become part of the church, or when did you join? Let's just say, how's that?
Well, essentially, when I was a young fellow, I declared myself an atheist when I was 8 years old. I had read Christian scriptures, and I read some Hindu scriptures, and I read Greek and Roman mythology, and I saw them all as being equivalent and equally fictional. So the idea that a deity existed and any religion had any validity beyond what it was doing socially, to me, was seemed obvious, that these things were social constructs. So I was an avid reader of science fiction, and I went down to a place called the Book Bar, which is a nice bookstore in the Port Authority bus terminal, because I used to take the bus from upstate New York, where I lived, to go down to the Museum of Natural History, where I'd go to the Hayden Planetarium and look at all of the fossils. I was particularly fascinated with dinosaurs and such. And on the way home, before catching the bus back upstate, because this was before I could drive, naturally, I was pretty young, I would always go and pick up new science fiction books, Arthur C. Clarke and Harlan Ellison and folks like that, because that was really one of my favorite forms of literature. And I saw this book on the book rack called The Satanic Bible. And I picked it up and looked at it and thought, I turned it over on the back. There's a picture of this guy with a shaved head and a goatee, that was tinted in red. And I thought, well, that's pretty theatrical and wild. Like, who is this guy? And I flipped through a few pages and thought, well, it sounds kind of interesting. I've read Christian scriptures and didn't think much of them, and maybe at some point I should read this and see what this perspective was. I actually set the book back on the rack and went and got about 4 other books that of authors that I loved. And then I was waiting online to pay, and there was a line, to get out of the store. And there was that black book again, sitting on the book rack. And I picked it up and said, all right, I'm going to read this. It's inexpensive, and it may be intriguing. And that was really it. That was the step. When I got home, I read that book from cover to cover in one sitting and realized that I was not just an atheist, that I was a Satanist. And that was really kind of an interesting thing to learn, that there was somebody out there who thought in many ways similar to the way I was thinking. And I had a new definition for myself, and one that actually focused things in ways that I found very useful for my life. So that was my conversion, if you will, to Satanism. We don't really feel that you can convert, actually. Satanism is a recognition of yourself in the philosophy. We always say that the books, our literature, serves as a mirror. And once you read it, if you see yourself reflected in that, then you're a Satanist. Or you might not want to be on some level. It might alarm you. But you might find that so much of the philosophy is really what it is that you have thought all along. And I think that's the magic about Satanism, that it's not being argued into something or being given some kind of revelation or you're saved or any kind of nonsense like that. It's really a very rational evaluation of yourself, being very self-aware, and then reading that literature and saying, this really is me in here.
So at that time, I mean, you were young. But what was your family reaction?
Well, my family knew that I was pretty precocious. I was reading early and doing all kinds of things, again, running down to the city by myself at a young age to go to museums and such. That it didn't bother them. They weren't particularly religious. They were my mother was technically a Catholic, and I think my father converted from Episcopalianism to be that just so they could get married. But she wasn't any kind of a real religious person. My mother liked to play music, and she was a pretty carnal lady as it was. And my father was an entrepreneur. He was always starting different businesses, and religion had no part of that. So I didn't grow up with any kind of philosophy being imposed on me. I was allowed to observe people around me, and I got a library card as soon as I could when I was young, and really began reading just a ton of things. I would take stacks of like 12 and 15, 20 books out at a time and read them and bring them back and get the same amount again. And they knew that I was sort of unusual as a child with the way I was absorbing information. So when I finally came out and said, well, this is how I see myself, they weren't surprised. They were just, oh, that's part of his development. They didn't give me any kind of negative feedback. They were really quite nice about it. And I've met so many people over the years, as you might imagine, and most folks' parents often have very different reactions. And I'm happy to say that my parents were really quite liberal in that sense. And we're happy that I could define myself and do it articulately because I would speak to them about it. And they were fine with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's quite good. I mean, in a way, parents should be more supportive. But I could see that scaring people because the general population has a point of view that Satanism is someone that, is against Christians or Jesus.
Well, we kind of are.
Well, yeah, but it's sort of. I mean, more in the aggressive point of view of Satan's trying to convert you, and you hate Jesus, and that sort of thing. The devil killed, that kind of.
Yeah. I think that's the problem with most Christians is that since Christianity has spent thousands of years trying to oppose anybody else who didn't agree with them, they figure that anybody who doesn't agree with them is going to do the same to them. And not that they don't deserve it, but our philosophy is one of live and let live. And our approach is as long as you have a point of view that's giving you a satisfactory way of handling your life, we feel more power to you. But don't try to impose it on us. And we find that, of course, today that many religions are trying to find ways of dealing with the government to impose their beliefs on people. We find in Middle Eastern nations, of course, they're linking up with all kinds of heavy-duty Islamic beliefs with Sharia laws and such that they want to impose on all of their citizens. And here we have plenty of laws that are still based on Christian concepts that really have no rational basis. And right now we have the great civil rights struggle for same-sex marriage going on, and really the opposition to it is solely based on religious ideas. And it obviously is something that should be swept away, any kind of opposition to that. But knowing how entrenched these things get, it's very difficult to do. The whole point of freedom is that people are not free to not be offended. If what our beliefs are bother you, then that's your problem and tough. That's what a free society is all about. You do what you like, other people are going to do what they like. As long as they're not forcing themselves on you in some way, then that's the consequence of living in a free society.
Yeah, well, I agree with that totally. I think that's kind of how it should be, but it's not always that way.
Well, most of the world and most of human history hasn't been that way. So I think that's kind of a remarkable thing about the late 20th century and moving into the 21st, that we're really getting to a point where we might have an equitable social contract that could, in time, work globally. That will be truly part of an evolution of human society, and that's something I think that we can look forward to helping evolve.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. I mean, but it's I think definitely in our future, not so much right now.
We're fighting we're in the trenches and on the barricades, and the revolution is going on.
Fight
to sweep away that. Well, and we do it, and that's, I think, the important thing though, is that at a certain point when you point out to people that it is simply a belief that is based in something that has nothing to do with anything real, anything that is part of existence, that's not part of an equitable, rational social contract, then if they can agree to say, okay, everybody's free to do what they want because, hey, you're marrying who you want to, that doesn't mean I'm going to be forced to marry somebody I don't want to, which seems to me obvious and self-evident, but dealing with some people is really like
sometimes it's hard.
stones.
Do you think that's just because of fear of the fear of maybe not having a religion?
Well, I think there's a fear in people because they are really being determined, most of their values, by something outside of themselves. They aren't self-determined. And if they see the source of those values being eroded, in their opinion, then they feel that the rug is being pulled out from under them and that they have no security anymore. And that just, of course, shows to me that they really didn't have very firm beliefs in the first place. But that's where I think that is definitely coming from in a social and psychological sense, that the framework of their understanding for the universe around them is one that is not so sturdy, and that alarms them and makes them terrified. Because they all want to believe, religions have spent so much time telling people their lives are just a transitory time, so if your life is crap, then don't worry about it. You do the right things and you're going to go to heaven and whatever that means too, because if you look in the texts of Christianity and such, heaven is a pretty boring place because it's all about praising God for eternity, which sounds like serving a megalomaniac, and I personally don't find that something I'd want to be looking forward to. And at least the Islamic folk feel you're going to have, virgins to have sex with or something. That's something, that's better for them probably than what they're getting. But that other alternative really sounds pretty awful. And that's what you're supposed to be hoping to achieve? Like, really? Of course, if you know anything about religions, there have been preachers that have tried to do things where they'd say, grab onto life. There was a guy named Reverend Ike who'd say, why have your pie by and by when you can have it right now with ice cream on top? And he was a Christian. And we're going, well, that's Satanism. Like, he found our philosophy and was trying to turn it into, throw Jesus in there somewhere.
Well, sell it any way they can, right?
Well, and they do. And I think, that is a problem with things, because since God doesn't come down and actually talk to people, aside from the people in asylums who tell you that he does, or running other crazy, pretentious organizations, again, people are very insecure mostly, and that they can doubt things leads to fear. And I think that's a change that Satanism offers, and a strength, in that we doubt everything, we question everything, we're skeptics. And that doesn't give us fear. It actually provides interest and stimulus for us. So that I think on a certain level that people who do always look towards some kind of outside authority figure to control their lives are a different kind of person than the people who look to themselves for their framework to live. I really think that it doesn't matter what culture you come from either, because you can really come from everywhere. People come from all over the world and become interested in Satanism because they feel alienated from this basic concept of having an authority tell you what to do and feeling comfortable with that. They've rankled under that kind of idea. And when they see Satanism, they say, wait a minute, that thing tells me that perspective says, be yourself and take responsibility for yourself. And they're not challenged. They're not frightened by that. And they're excited by that. But I think that's a rare kind of person. It's a sort of niche. And that's why I think Satanism will always be basically a niche philosophy for those sort of people.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to change people that generations after generations that live in a certain religion or...
Well, it is. It's very hard, especially when you look over the past where those religions have been linked with governmental states and therefore were free to impose their ideas on everybody under them. When you look back at the Inquisition, when people were being burnt at the stake, first being tortured, and then, of course, their properties and their lands and their beholdings, whatever they had was confiscated by the church. And of course, the right bribes are paid to the right governmental officials, and they are profiting on anybody they didn't like, condemning them with witchcraft, whether they actually were trying to practice anything that might be defined as sorcery or not. And that's a scary thing when a religion has that kind of hand-in-glove control over the populace with the governmental force. And it's all throughout human history, though, and it really doesn't matter what culture you look at. That's generally been the state of being for the human species.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to stop for a break now. And when we come back, let's talk about the media.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Ellen.
One night, I was at a bar.
One night, I was at a bar.
I had one too many drinks.
I had one too many drinks.
I got behind the wheel.
I got a cab.
A squirrel ran across the road.
A squirrel ran across the road.
I swerved.
The cab swerved.
I hit a guy.
The cabbie just missed a guy.
I wish I took a cab.
Thank goodness I took a cab.
You have the choice to save a life. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the Department of Transportation and the Ad Council.
Oh, I didn't see it coming, but it came in a can. Now my sweet son's braid into a man.
Mine too, and hey, we know just who to blame. When our sons have fun with women and misbehave.
Old Spice,
Old Spice,
braid a man on my son.
now he's kissing all the women and his chores aren't done.
He was just my little sweetie, tiny fingers, hands and feeties. Now he's touching, kissing, feeling all the women because Old Spice sprayed a man on my son. Now he smells like a man, and they treat him like one.
Okay, we're back now, and conversation's been really interesting. Talking about Satanism and the church, how do you think the public perception is? Like, I'm just as in media or Hollywood. What do you think of films?
Well, there's been very little in the way of films that have actually defined Satanism in a way that's consistent with the reality of it. They're usually horror films, and there's some kind of crazy devil worship going on, where there's somebody going to be sacrificed to the Prince of Darkness or one of his assorted infernal minions. And they're meant to just frighten people, because Satan, of course, has always served as an easy boogeyman. Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, as he's kept it in business all of these years. And that certainly is true for Hollywood as well. Of course, though, there's always interesting exceptions. If you saw The Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino playing Satan, some of his ideas, even though he's playing a real Satan and we don't believe such a thing exists, his philosophy was actually kind of carnal and realistic and pragmatic and refreshingly satanic. And if you even go back to the old Roger Corman Mask of the Red Death film starring Vincent Price, he plays Prince Prospero, who is essentially a devil worshipper. but there are parts of his speeches which were really before the Church of Satan was founded, that movie came out, that are really spot on Satanism. It's really kind of fun. And I always suggest to people that watching a good old Vincent Price movie is an excellent thing to do for Halloween. So dig out that one if you can. I think there's a brand new collection of them coming out on Blu-ray. And you can never have too much Vincent Price in your life.
No, he had the perfect look and voice and everything.
Oh yeah, he was a handsome devil and brilliant man and an excellent actor, a total diabolical exemplar for our kind of folks to follow.
That's quite good. Is that the kind of movies you watch personally a lot, or what other things do you just stick to that, or?
Well, I'm actually a big Godzilla fan, and I really like giant monster movies, and horror movies, of course, are fun, vampire films and ghost films. The Haunting, the original one, is truly a brilliant movie because it's set up in such a way that it could all be in the minds of the characters. Even though they're physical manifestations, they might be as poltergeist phenomenon that are generated by the people present, and nothing actually supernatural. There may not be any ghosts there at all. And that's what makes that film so wonderfully terrifying, is that it explores these fringes of reality and what could be going on. And it's filmed so well, and the score is amazing. It's got a lot of atonal passages, and great movie.
Music do you like? Typical heavy metal? No, I had to throw that in. Come on.
Yes, of course. Well, that's always fun because what happened, metal decided that the devil was going to be a staple of that genre, and it became widespread. And, of course, there are Satanists who are metal musicians. King Diamond is quite open about his membership in the Church of Satan. But then there are different people like Mark Almond of Soft Cell, and he's a member too, as he's admitted. And I can't tell you people who aren't. We're very confidential about membership, but a number of our folks have been quite open about being members. Marilyn Manson too. He was definitely. I mean, he was given an honorary priesthood in our church, and he understands the philosophy quite well. Even though the music that he does is his own, it's his own artwork and his own creation. It's not trying to present Satanism. It's just presenting his own artistic endeavors. But for me, I am a classically trained musician. I have a bachelor's and master's degrees in music composition from NYU. And the kind of music I listen to, really, I start with, say, Mozart and Beethoven and go up to contemporary film composers and other contemporary orchestral music composers. John Corigliano is one of my favorites. He's really writing some fascinating stuff these days. But favorite composers would be Mahler, Bruckner, and Shostakovich. And in the film realm, Bernard Herrmann, John Williams, and Jerry Goldsmith are my three favorites. So it's all exciting orchestral music, and that's really the life's blood of my listening life.
Yeah, Mozart was good. I that was one of my favorites. Anything in the pop radio rock category you like?
I don't like any of that.
It's too much junk food, right?
Well, it never connected for me, and I'm probably one of the more unusual people in that respect, because almost everybody I know, even other musicians that have the same kind of training that I do, they always have some pop music that they like, and I never listen to it. I have no draw. It doesn't draw me. It doesn't give me the emotional resonance that satisfies. I'll listen to, say, a band like the Upper Crust now and again when I'm driving, because their songs are funny. Like, they basically do these rock songs, but they dress up as fops and wear powdered wigs, and all of the songs are these hilarious social commentaries about the aristocratic position, but delivered in this contemporary pop music sort of genre, and their stuff is funny. Is it something I listen to for music? No, it's something that I listen to for entertainment. I'm not attracted to anything pop music-wise. Now, Anton LaVey, who founded the Church of Satan, he too played and enjoyed classical music, but he was really interested in what they call nowadays the American Classic Songbook, the great songs and lyrics from, say, the 1920s through the 1940s and 50s. He really enjoyed the way that the Tin Pan Alley composers would take very poignant lyrics and combine them with melodies and harmonies that were very effective in communicating the emotional content of the words. And he had vast amounts of them memorized and could play them free with the keyboards, and he would sort of sing, speak along, his sort of Sprechstimme. He was going. He wasn't really a singer, but he would. He's done recordings of that kind of thing, and he'd do a very sort of like a band kind of thing that you'd find in a dive bar where the cigarettes being smoked and the half-empty scotch glasses there, and maybe there's some lipstick on the edge of it, and the lights are low and people are sort of trying to feel each other out for wherever the night is going to go, and that kind of atmosphere is something he liked to capture. And he would do that when you'd visit him. He had a huge bank of synthesizers he had programmed to imitate these different sorts of cheesy bands, and he would play all the different keyboards, and since he was an organist, he could also play foot pedals. So he would recreate this, and he'd love if you'd sing along with him different things. So
Hollywood's not really a positive thing for the Church of Satan, or...
Well, most Hollywood films are really just meant to frighten people when they bring Satanism up. We'd really love to see something where a Satanist was an actual character and was the skeptical, intelligent person who maybe solved a situation, who kept, clear-headed and was as somebody that you went to, maybe not the hero, because that might be way too much for the general audience to accept, although who knows, maybe that'll happen before I pass away.
Super Satan.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly, when you watch these contemporary superhero films, Loki is, the devil in the Norse mythology, and he certainly is getting lots of love from the audience. And you'd have to say that in the Avengers, Tony Stark, he's a total Satanist in philosophy and the way he behaves. So, I think we've got some, they're not explicitly Satanists, but we've got some very satanic people out there in films that are quite popular right now.
And so how do you like the way the media portrays it? Because for me, every time I've heard in the past, it's always some sort of, some sort of serial killer or some sort of something that's pretty bad, and they're always sort of saying, well, it was a devil worshiper or a Satanist, and
Well, that's been an issue for us. Back during the 80s and 90s, there was something called the Satanic Panic. And at that time, what was happening were Christian evangelists decided that a way of getting people under their control was to tell the world that they had been former members of evil cults that literally were in communication with the devil himself. And that they were all high priests and high priestesses. And these would be people with an IQ of about 76 sometimes talking. So you'd think, well, Satan's got pretty low standards where that's concerned. But the idea was that from kids spraying graffitied pentagrams under, highway overpasses up to generals of leading armies and corporate heads, everybody was tied together in this grand conspiracy ruled by Satan himself from the underworld to subvert Christianity and the word of Jesus. And newscasters, particularly Geraldo Rivera, ran with that. They found it a great way of entertaining people and getting attention, and they promoted these people saying this nonsensical garbage. And I spent a lot of time on shows with these folks, debunking them. And the FBI naturally spent time researching this because all of it was alleged criminal behavior, and they don't take that lying down. So when they looked into it, they really found no evidence of any of it. What was sad, though, is that we found that kind of journalism actually got people to imitate the sort of villainous portrayal that they were making. And we would call these people Geraldo Satanists, where a bunch of kids would take drugs, they'd put a pentagram on a tree, and then they'd go out and decide to sacrifice a cat or something because they thought, hey, I'm being a Satanist, and this is cool, and I'm evil, and I'm rebellious. And frankly, that was not a good thing.
Where do you think they get the idea to do something like that? They go and sacrifice a cat or a goat or something, right?
Yeah, well, it was every day if you're watching these talk shows, people were telling you, oh, this is going on. There's Satanists out there with portable crematoria, and that women are breeding babies for Satan that are being sacrificed. We had that McMartin trial, which was, I still think it's now the most expensive trial in all of American jurisprudence. And that was all about child abuse and sacrifice at a daycare center, and none of it was true. It went on for years, it ruined people's lives, it cost millions of dollars, and it was all nonsense. And this kind of hysteria is something that seems to grip the public easily. And when you have folks who are basically have a P.T. Barnum attitude of whatever the show is and can make us a few nickels, let's run with it. When so-called journalism is putting on that kind of dog and pony show, and then Hollywood, of course, follows suit too. As we said before, that the horror movies. There's always been horror movies. If you go back to the Black Cat from the 1930s, you have Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. And Boris Karloff is the brilliant architect of an ultra-modern building, and he's the high priest of a satanic cult. But of course, when you see, he's brilliant, he's a genius, and the people following him are all dressed in tuxedos and women in beautiful evening gowns, and their whole ritual chamber is futuristic with strange angles and pylons and very Art Deco. Even then they were trying to deal with Satanism as something scary and frightening, because Karloff was murdering the women that he was in love with and preserving them in glass cases because he didn't want to lose their beauty. So they made him essentially a form of serial killer to frighten people. But when you look at it, though, even at that point of view, like, the Satanists were people of wealth, power, and intelligence. And clearly folks who were they weren't peasants, I'll put it that way. That myth has been there for a long time.
Yeah, and and journalism's gone all, excuse the pun, gone to hell, right? I mean, it really has. Journalism's now just for the most part entertainment.
Oh, it's utterly entertainment. But the worst part of contemporary journalism is nobody does any research. You could issue a press release that said a giant spaceship landed in Cameroon, and elephant-like aliens came out and waved, and then invited Jesus down for tea. And people would say they just report it. They just repeat it. They wouldn't in any way examine that there was some factuality to this. And there are plenty of folks who take advantage of that naturally. It's why wouldn't they? It's an easy way to get attention. And if you can get attention, you can probably get money off of people. Yeah. So that's what's going on in the world. But when I was growing up, I used to read newspapers that actually had fact-checking, and that if something was an error, they'd print retractions. They would be really concerned about getting things straight. And, when they had opinions about things, those were in editorials. The rest of the reporting was trying to explain factually what had gone on. With the blog culture that we have today, everything's an editorial, and nobody understands that that's really not journalism. That's something different. When you're doing something like that, you're intruding yourself onto the stories that you're working on. And I really think that since those lines have been blurred and it's all become infotainment, that journalism is certainly dead.
Yeah. I can't rely on any of the network news broadcasts any more than Facebook.
No.
Well, you know what I mean, because you see things on Facebook about things happening. This Martian landed, or somebody died or something, and it's just the same as watching a network. It's it's whoever's the prettiest. And
yeah. Well, again, our culture is set up to worship celebrities and stars, and you have these vapid, pretty people who have nothing of importance to say, and everybody's following them around, wondering what they're doing. And I have to look at that and ask why. Like, most of them are not doing anything of value. At least when you had some actors were doing excellent portrayals, you might say that's interesting, but do you care what they think about anything else? I don't think so. I'd be interested in seeing them act a good role in a movie, but I really don't care what they think about anything else.
Yeah,
if I wanted
just another person.
Yeah, and that idea seems to really have been lost on most folks, because they worship celebrity. And with things like Facebook, which are brilliant, because what it did is it gave everybody celebrity. You're a celebrity with your friends, amongst that audience. You can be the star. So Andy Warhol's idea of 15 minutes of fame has been long extended by things like that.
Yeah, I love all the pictures of, here, I'm having breakfast. Here, I'm going to the bathroom. Great. Lovely.
Well, what's funny, too, about that is my wife makes a point about it, that you might put up something that, I found this, I went to this place and had this amazing homemade chocolate ice cream, but it's in an ice cream parlor, and it was stunning. And somebody else will then chime in, I don't like chocolate. I like strawberry. And you'll be like, who asked you?
Yeah.
and see, and that's one of our satanic sins, is don't give opinions or advice unless you are asked. In fact, that's the number one sin. The number one rule of the earth that we have. In Satanism, of course, we've set up this idea that we have rules of the earth, which are about how people should live with each other, and we have sins that are essentially behaviors that we don't want to do. They're nothing that anybody's going to punish you for, but they're things that you might feel kind of like an idiot if you get stuck doing these things. So that, for us, of course, stupidity is the cardinal sin, because we think it ought to be painful. We try to. The whole point with Satanism is to try to get people to behave in a rational manner, to whatever your capacity for that might be, and that's certainly a tall order.
Oh yeah. I can't say enough about that. Okay, well, let's take a break here, and we'll come back and talk about this more.
I am living on Channel Z.
You're listening to Z-Talk Radio Network.
I am living on Channel Z.
Far from the city, where the Lorax roams free, is the home of a magical truffula trees. They grow happy and healthy and thick as you please, just waiting for visits from yous and from me's. Whoa. In a place you will love, with things you'll adorest. It's a magical spot. We call it the forest.
Look, everyone here needs the trees.
And who are you?
I'm the Lorax, guardian of the forest. I speak to the trees.
Visit the animals. Come see the plants. From the mighty sequoia to the tiniest ants. Discover its beauty. Take time to relax. See brown barbaloots or even the Lorax.
I feel so alive! I just like hearing you say it.
The forest is there for you to explore. So come once to see it, then come back lots more. Visit discovertheforest.org. This message has been brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
With us still is Peter Gilmore from the Church of Satan, and we left off talking about, well, all sorts of things here, but it's been really, really interesting. Now, I know people would probably be interested in knowing kind of what your life is like as a Satanist, and I don't like labeling people or labeling kind of what everybody does, and this is, they do this because they're that, but I guess in a way, if you could talk about that, like how much do you go to the church? Like, what is the church involved? Do you go every day or every month, and what do you do?
Well, most interestingly, the Church of Satan is a concept. It's an idea. It's the people in it. It's not a building. We don't gather for meetings or services. Essentially, it's the Church of Satan are people who share the philosophy of Satanism. And since the basic idea to our philosophy is individualism, everybody determines their own personal values and tastes and pursues them. Satanists might deal with each other if they can meet each other by knowing that they're Satanists, but they really only interact on a deeper level if they share other things beyond Satanism. Because Satanism is, again, just a tool for getting the most out of your life rather than a devotion. There's no worship in Satanism. There's no faith in Satanism. We do have ritual, but ritual is basically a form of psychology that we employ. lesser magic is something that is a form of magic, which is manipulation of people around you. It's learning how to be charming, learning how to be glamorous, speaking to people so that they will do things that you would like them to do. It's old school charm, which so many people seem to have lost these days, because they simply think that because they exist, everything should be theirs, which I think older folks like us find a little tedious. But our greater magic is which is ritual magic, is the idea of having an emotional decompression chamber. It's an intellectual decompression chamber, as Anton LaVey called it specifically. The idea was to set up a framework of ritual where you express emotions and release them that are hindering you from pursuing your regular pursuits. And by getting that out of your system, it's a form of self-therapy. It's very cathartic. You could call it self-transformational psychodrama if you want to use fancy words. But essentially, it's a way of really making yourself feel better. You can deal with grief or lust or anger, all of these things, any kind of emotion that you have, but one that's become obsessive in your life, and the idea is to let it go. And then you can go out and do things that you want. And ritual is a dramatic format, and it's very personal because you're dealing with these deep emotions. It's not a worship service. It's not, hey, you get a whole bunch of people together and they pray and jump up and down and all that kind of stuff. LaVey gave basic format for ritual in the Satanic Bible and the Satanic rituals, and that can be altered at will because, again, ritual is meant to be something that's personally affecting. So it's not something that we need to have other people for. Ritual can be solely something you do yourself, and it can all be done in your mind, too, in your imagination. It doesn't need ritual tools like candles and bells and all that kind of stuff, which is fun. It's theatrical, and I think a lot of people enjoy being the center of attention in ritual. That's a clever aspect of our satanic ritual. You can always be the celebrant in your own ritual. So you run the show, and you don't have an audience in ritual. When you go to a lot of worship services for spiritual religions, there's some kind of priest of some sort, and he's interceding with the supernatural entity that the folks believe in. And the congregation is generally just repeating things and standing up and sitting down and praying and doing all that kind of stuff. But in many instances, it's not something that they are really participating in a way that's significant emotionally. Some of them are. I mean, it all depends on what you get out of that kind of rite. I know I had just attended an old school Catholic funeral just a few days ago, and it was done in a church in Jersey, and it was definitely the old kind of church with the spooky statues and the stained glass, and it had a nice organ and all of that. And the priest was actually a good fellow in that he was kind of putting satanic ideas into the way you would think about someone who's deceased. Because often the Christians are always, they're better off, they're with God, it's so much better. But he kept emphasizing the idea of remembering the person who had passed away. And that's something that's essential to us. In the Satanic Funeral, which I wrote in my book, The Satanic Scriptures, the whole point of that is remembering what the deceased did for you in your life, how you interacted with them, how they enriched you. And the whole process of the funeral rite is for people to come forward and talk about that if they feel free to share that kind of thing. If it's too much of an intimacy, they can keep it to themselves. But we think that there is no afterlife in Satanism. We really don't believe in such things. And that you only live on in the memories of others or by anything that you created during your life.
Okay, so you don't really follow an afterlife. Like when you die, it's over.
Yep, that's it, which is why life is so damn precious to us. Don't waste a minute because you're not getting that minute back. You can't tell when you're going to go. And for us, we try to live life as it's going to be like a lovely party that you don't want to leave. So really, don't waste your time. Like, don't defer things that you want to do. Most religions tell people that the good stuff is happening after death. That's what Monty Python said. Do you get afterlife mints? And we don't think that you're going to get any afterlife mints. Go out and buy some, nice truffles right now and enjoy them.
Just one more mint. So then, no afterlife, not a thing. So no reincarnation, nothing like that.
No, we don't think that's. We think there's no evidence of that, and that it's just It's just people living pipe dreams. I think all those ideas were invented by folks who wanted to control people who basically are not satisfied with their lives. And you can only enslave people if you're holding out a carrot of something that they want that they don't currently have. And if you offer them things like that that they have no proof of, you won't know until you're dead. It's like, well, that's a good one. The greatest confidence scheme ever put on the human species.
Well, yeah, it's going to be a tough one to prove.
Oh, they're all happy now. Well, then you get, the people who are claiming that they're in touch with the dead and whatever. And it's just like, okay, as I think we were talking earlier about the idea of, if there were spirits and such, then and they could communicate with the living. Why aren't we talking to important, interesting people? Why isn't Beethoven writing new sonatas and symphonies? And why isn't Galileo being updated on Apple technology and see what's going on? Like, wouldn't these consciousnesses be something that would be really fascinating to be involved with? I would love if that was the case, but it just isn't, sadly.
Yeah, well, didn't you hear? That's the new Apple release.
It's iPad, to Air.
Yeah.
It's now got a direct line to the Afterlife.
Yeah,
there's an app for that.
The iDead. All yours. 2 screen sizes. Yeah,
yes, exactly.
There, or do you think there's other planets, other life?
Oh, well. I mean, we know there are other planets, and more recently, astronomers are figuring out that it seems that Earth-like planets may not be as uncommon as were originally suspected. So that life as we know it, based on our kind of world, certainly must exist out there. And we also don't know what other kinds of life forms might exist on other planets that are radically different. We need to keep looking into that. But what's interesting is that I, again, as a big fan of science fiction literature, we're always trying to project on alien beings and consciousnesses that they would somehow be like us, that they would understand what we're doing, that they'd have culture, they'd have literature, they'd have art. And it might be that an alien consciousness would, in fact, be truly alien and not have any kind of motivations that would be congruent with ours at all. They might simply need what we have, and if they do and they have better technology than us, then they'll come and take it, and they won't care about us. They might not even understand us, and we could possibly not understand them. There have been some scientists who point out the idea that if we keep sending out messages into space saying, "Here we are," that somebody might answer that and journey here, and we might not be so happy with the result.
Yeah, might not be so good.
Yeah, well, because again, what we see when an advanced culture of humans visits a less advanced culture, the less advanced culture is always subjugated and suffers. So knowing that, anything that could come here is certainly more advanced than we are, because we're not out there. We don't have the Enterprise. We're not visiting, strange worlds and new civilizations. So anybody who had the capability to do that is certainly, unless they're somehow wonderfully equitable and open-minded, and gee, how unlikely is that? We're in for trouble when we run into some superior technological civilization.
Yeah. It's not looking good.
No, but the other interesting thing too is that the known universe is so vast that if high technological civilizations that don't destroy themselves but become spacefaring, they may happen rarely, and they may be separated by such great distances that the idea that they would encounter each other may be something that's very rare. I mean, we haven't encountered anybody yet, but we're not in any kind of central hub of the galaxy. We're a fairly insignificant planet in a fairly insignificant galaxy. So, elsewhere there might be more action going on. But there's just a lot for us to learn. Our species is out there and growing. What's I always found interesting when you read Frank Herbert and his Dune books.
Oh, yeah.
His idea was that there really was no alien intelligence, that the culture that became spread across the known universe was humans. They were the first, and humans altered themselves radically during this spread throughout the galaxy using, spice and other things. But his idea didn't have alien intelligence. The only intelligence was human intelligence and human-made machine intelligence. And I think that's a very interesting and bleak concept. And few people really key into that idea. so many science fiction writers are just happy to invent, one or many, billions of different civilizations, and all of them, of course, are reflections on aspects of our own species. But who knows? Who knows what's out there?
So what's your favorite science fiction? I guess, obviously, that's a big thing for you, books and even maybe movies and TV.
Oh, sure. Oh, Star Trek meant a lot to me as a young fellow, because the idea that we would journey out amongst the habitable planets and encounter different cultures, to me, I thought was fascinating. That there would be other species with other ways of doing things, other vehicles, other musics, other foods, all the interesting things that when we deal with our own Earth, when we go to different cultures, the idea of exoticism, that we kind of absorb these things that are alien to us, but then we find a way of making them comfortable for us to enjoy. That's always been something that I've liked. And that even brings in the idea of when the tiki culture came about in the 50s. It had early antecedents, of course, but we looked at sort of South Seas cultures and decided to transmute them in a way that was pleasurable to us. And we used some of the architecture. We had restaurants and bars and drinks that were made up by people that had nothing to do with what the people were really drinking in those cultures. But we had this sense of exoticism where we basically purloined things that interested us and then had fun with them. And that too is I think a guiding force in how I aesthetically view the universe, is that again, the universe is something to be enjoyed. So I don't have to feel that I'm dealing with something authentic in order to have fun with it.
So how do you feel about death then? I mean, you're saying there's no afterlife. That's it. Game over. You fall off the bridge. It's over. So as the, let's say, the church itself or the group and you guys not believe in killing, or that you think it's bad, right?
Well, the whole point is it depends on who's killing who and for what reason. We want to live as long as we can. But of course, since we understand that our species is based on aggression in many ways, and that our various cultures fight against each other for dominance, that we understand the idea of having military. It's necessary. If you have a culture like, say, some of these Islamic cultures that are bent on, really, they'd love to have world hegemony if they could. You can't let that happen. They would extinguish the kind of secularist, free society that we're trying to establish in a heartbeat if they could. So, you have to have that. And of course, if people attack you, we believe in Satanism that, you have a right to fight back. We are not turn the other cheek kind of people. If you smash me on one cheek, I'm going to smash you harder right back. But we kind of keep it in a social framework of the idea that the punishment should fit in kind and degree the crime. So we don't advocate willy-nilly going out and murdering people. We don't admire serial killers and criminals in that sense, because they're basically breaking the social contract. We believe we should have law enforcement to deal with that, but a responsible law enforcement, not one that's terrorizing its citizens based on their own fears, which sadly seems to be the case in some instances that we're finding more and more these days. So we're interested in having an equitable society that's balanced so that we can enjoy this life that we have to the fullest extent. We call that vital existence, instead of these spiritual pipe dreams, these offers of heaven or whatever kind of afterlife that is expected in whatever mythology you're dealing with.
Ritual for death, not that that's a ritual, but what do you guys do? Do you guys just bury your dead? Do you guys burn them? Like, how? That sounds kind of raw, but No, I get it. No, essentially, the way of disposing of the body should be up to the person before they pass. They could decide whether they want to be buried someplace, if they want to be cremated. Anton LaVey was cremated, and I expect that to happen. I don't like the idea of my body being someplace, and especially because I'm sort of a well-known person. You never know what people are going to do to wherever you're interred. So, not that I'd know I'd be dead, but I was going to say no. But I don't know if it's really going to matter. But.
Yeah, it's not going to really matter. But I'm not even going to leave that open to chance. But again, that aspect we leave open to people, and we have a funeral rite that can deal with however one's body is being dealt with. And as I said before, the essence of the funeral rite is to bring up remembrances of the person who's passed, all of the things that they've done, either personally for you or things that they've created. And we're about, again, we're enjoying ourselves, and we cherish people. We accept the full range of human emotions, and those go from love on one end to hate on the other. And we find each of these extremes, but each of them are natural. And they're also things that one doesn't experience constantly. They have more of a rarity in your spectrum of day-to-day feelings. And you give love to people that you cherish, people who've won your admiration. And you can hate people who do bad things to you, or things to the people that you care for, or objects that you would enjoy. So each is acceptable. We don't pretend that we can't hate, because of course people hate. If you ride in a car with somebody and somebody cuts you off in traffic and you hear the string of expletives that come out, you know that road rage is not an unusual thing. But it passes quickly. You let it go. And love is something that is enduring and can be, for many people. I mean, I've been married for decades to my wife, so you can build a long relationship. But the idea that we're not canceling out like what people would consider the negative end just for the positive end. Most Christians will say, love one another and universal brotherhood and all of that. But I think that waters it down, because you really don't love everybody. I think that's unrealistic to even claim that, and ridiculous to even attempt it, because it just makes love meaningless.
Now, because there's another theory or idea out there about witchcraft and Satanists being the same. And I know that they're not. Well, I think I know. But what's your opinion on witchcraft?
Well, it would depend on how you want to approach that. The religion of Wicca that was created by Gardner, based on his researches into pagan practices and Western magical practices. He made it up with Doreen Valiente out of whole cloth. They created a religion claiming to be a pagan survival, which it wasn't at all, and that's all been proven. There's been some really interesting books that show exactly, by examining all of his papers and her papers, how they invented the whole thing. But that's very satisfying for a number of people, to have a neo-paganism that brings back these more humanistic deities that were more like you found in classical pagans, like Greeks and Romans, or the Norse pantheon, because those deities were essentially aspects of human beings. They weren't this abstract, evil, stern father figure from afar that mandated that you do everything according to his will and punished you forever if you didn't. They were generally something that most people could understand. Most neo-paganism and witchcraft of that sort, as part of it, is trying to bring back a more humanistic aspect to religious experience, and I totally applaud that. It's not something, and the thing is, not all neo-pagans believe that those deities exist. Of course, some do, and the ones who do, I think they're just as foolish as the Christians, believing that their God and Jesus exist. But there are many neo-pagans who just see their deities as archetypes that are influential to them and exemplars for how they should lead their lives. And I think that's a fine thing. Now, witchcraft itself is something that Anton LaVey would use to describe female wiles being employed, using their sexuality to control men. And he wrote a book first it was called The Complete Witch, but then he retitled it The Satanic Witch. And it is a manual for how ladies can basically vamp men into doing exactly what they want, because most straight men are easily controlled by women. It's and Anton LaVey said, that power is there. Take it and use it. Like, why throw that out with the bathwater?
Yeah, that's very common. Boy.
Oh yeah. Well, and the thing is, you watch reality shows, some crazy ones, and there's often you see that the women are vamping the men into doing what they want, but the guys are often just such grown-up children. They're grown up in age, but not in demeanor. And that they end up having to be mothers instead of spouses. So those games are still being played. But what LaVey was saying is that those kind of games that are played between the sexes are interesting. And he always felt that studying the psychology of the human animal was very important, because that's where we live. We live in a society of other human beings. That's really, we don't live in, on a, off on a plain, in the desert or in a forest. We interact with other people constantly, and especially now in the days of the internet, that's even more so part of our daily existence. So understanding the psychology of our species is a prime concern to Satanists.
Wow. Okay. We're going to take a break here, and we'll be back.
Sir?
I'll get it together. I promise.
Ronnie, how happy are folks who save hundreds of dollars switching to Geico?
I'd say happier than the Pillsbury Doughboy on his way to a baking convention.
Get happy. Get Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
To celebrate the not normal Mini Cooper, we hired an expert to tell you about Mini telepathically.
Greetings. Relax and listen to my mind. The Mini Cooper hardtop comes with 37 mpg and go-kart handling.
Wait, that's not telepathy.
Listen again. The bigger four-door Mini Countryman has seating for 5.
Okay, you're just whispering.
You're still paying me for this.
Come see the 37 mpg Mini Cooper hardtop and the bigger Mini Countryman today. Visit miniusa.com/info for MPG details.
The Satanist lifestyle. I guess that's, again, these words, I don't know if I can use them. But, the day-to-day life of a Satanist, how's that?
Well, I'd have to speak to my day-to-day life, which, being a Satanist, since we're all about individualism, each Satanist has their own satanic lifestyle.
So there's no real rule, like you guys, again, people are going to look at it, they're looking at it as like a religion, as in Christian or Catholic or Jewish, and there's certain rules, pray certain days.
Right. It doesn't work like that for us. We have a very open calendar in that sense, that when we celebrate days, they're usually the turnings of the seasons, and the equinoxes and the solstices, and then the midpoints between them. But that's not even required. You don't have to celebrate anything. For the Satanists, our highest holiday of the year is our own birthday, which of course makes sense for a religion that has rational self-interest as its highest point. But Satanists live in so many different ways, and you might not ever know that people you encounter are Satanists unless maybe they're wearing a little sigil of Baphomet or something like that, or they choose to do something a little more obvious. I mean, I'm the high priest of the Church of Satan. I live in a big, spooky Victorian house with a tower, and it's painted basically black, but with 2 purples, 2 reds, and copper as accent colors. So I have a fence that I put around it that looks like something that would be on a finer, old-style cemetery. And we've landscaped the grounds with wonderfully interesting trees and bushes and such. One of them is a weeping Norwegian spruce that almost looks like a monster from the Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea show. But we have we have a Japanese maple with beautiful red leaves, and a thunderhead plum also with red leaves. We have a burgundy contorta that its branches look like interwoven snakes. So, and also from the summer we had all these beautiful kanna, which are a tropical plant that has red flowers, and they got really tall. They're about 6 feet tall. And we have moonflowers all wrapped around, the vines wrap around our front fence, and the flowers open up at night with these wonderful scents. So we try to make our place kind of magical and evocative. And when I painted the house originally, people up here got very nervous because it was basically beige, and it had been a crack house. And when we bought it, it took us 5 years to restore it because it had been essentially ruined. But the architecture is what exactly we wanted. It looks like a classic haunted house. So we bought it and fixed it up, and now it's a different kind of landmark. It used to be a bland house, and now it's one that people stop by and take photographs of all the time. And our dog, Contessa Bella Lugosi, she's a black chow chow. And she's often in the front yard just basking in the sun, but keeping an eye on people and maybe giving a little growl if they tend to get too close. But the gates keep folks out, and they see it as an interesting, strange location in the neighborhood. We have a friend down the block. He had been here before we were. We found this town of Poughkeepsie by visiting him, and he has a house that's more Munsters in configuration. His house is the Witch House, and it's Halloween 365 days there too, and before us. And he has these strange sort of woven pumpkin-headed figures made of like branches on the front porch. He has a lenticular skull face up in the peak of the roof, and he has a witch weather vane spinning on the top of the house. And between our 2 houses every Halloween, we really do it up. We give out candy, which a lot of people have stopped doing these days, but we do. And we'll light the places. I put orange and black bunting up, and he'll have animatronic figures on his porch and fog machines going. And we've at times had strolling violinists walking back and forth playing spooky music, or we had a creepy clown one year who was mute but terrifying to people. So folks come from all over to visit our houses every Halloween to trick or treat, and we become kind of a fixture of the neighborhood that way. It's a lot of fun. So, for us, since we love Halloween, we've loved it since we were kids. We've made that kind of part of our lifestyle in a sense. But that's not something you'll necessarily find from most Satanists. They follow whatever it is that they enjoy. We have some Satanists who live in very modern-looking houses, some ultra-modern. Some really like things from the 50s or 60s and do these mid-century homes filled with period furniture. And we have people who are neo-medievalists on some level who try to make their houses more dark and spooky and Renaissance and such. Older times, like not just Victorian, but going back in history. And of course, these days that whole SCA thing, folks kind of blend all these time periods together and try to make it more palatable, because naturally life was pretty miserable and by our contemporary standards in those days. But again, that's the exoticism that Satanists enjoy. You're really free to look throughout history or even fantasy to do something interesting with your environment. Most Satanists that I know are very involved in making where they live something that they find exciting. So if you meet somebody who has a really unusual house, that could be a hint, that's they really made an environment that is engaging and exciting and something specific. I'm just teasing there. Not everybody, of course, who does that is a Satanist, but it is something that does seem to be fairly in common amongst a lot of our people. That their home environment is crucial to them because that's where they are. That's where you spend your time. We call our homes our lairs, and we really like our lairs to be personalized. and we do it to the best of our abilities.
Well, it should be. You sound like be a perfectly good neighbor for me. I wouldn't mind at all.
Well, our neighbors, it's always fun. When my wife and I lived in the city for about close to 35 years, in the apartment building we were in, everybody liked us and trusted us, and everybody gave us their keys. Because if anything was going on in their apartments, they'd ask if we could oversee it, because they knew we were actually very strong-willed, and whatever work was being done, we'd make sure it was done right for them. So, here's the evil Satanists, and we've got everybody's keys to their apartments. Yeah. And up here, we have a great relationship with the people near us. And people are happy that we've kind of taken a house that was a ruin and made it into a show place, and they're happy to come. They stop, ask about the color scheme, and ask for consultation. I've actually consulted with a number of people on how to evolve color schemes for their houses, because I studied Victorian painting ideas going back to the originals and through the painted lady phenomenon. So and since I did a lot of design over the years, I'm actually a good person to talk to about that. So they come by and ask, and I have fun helping them figure out how to make color schemes that will really make them feel excited about their places. So yeah, we're good neighbors.
Okay. And so you said you're a high priest.
I'm the high priest. There's only one.
There's only one.
Time.
Okay. And
yes,
so what
Anton
is that?
LaVey was the first one.
What does that entail?
Well, being the high priest means you run the organization. So the Church of Satan's founder, Anton LaVey, was the first high priest. And when he passed on, his companion, Blanche Barton, was high priestess. And she passed on the reins to me in 2001, and I became the high priest. So, I'm the only one, and at some point I'll pass that on to somebody else.
Okay. And so what kind of duties do you have? I mean, in general.
Well,
as in general. I mean, I'm not asking for this detailed sort of thing, but just
what I do as the high priest of the Church of Satan is to make sure that this philosophy is being presented as accurately as possible to the world. That was what I spoke with Anton LaVey about when he was alive. My wife and I used to visit him in San Francisco, at least once a year, and spend a week or two in his company. And the whole point was that this concept of Satanism as this atheist philosophy is something that we wanted to make sure is communicated to the world in as many languages as possible and as directly as possible. So that's my essential duty. Is the whole purpose of the Church of Satan is to communicate the philosophy of Satanism, and that's basically the real duty of the church. That's the whole purpose of the organization. And so I oversee that, essentially. And by doing that, I write commentaries about things. I write essays. I do interviews. Constantly. I do lectures. All that sort of stuff. So I'm the chief communicator of Satanism to the world. That's my job.
Okay. Now there is a book of Satan, or Satanic Bible, correct?
Yes, Anton LaVey's first book was entitled The Satanic Bible, and like the Church of Satan, the idea was to be theatrical and attention-grabbing. So his take on Satanism is encoded in that book, and it's set up in a way that looks impressive and interesting. It's got its theatricality to it. It's divided into 4 parts, dealing with Satan, Lucifer, Belial, and Leviathan, which are the 4 crown princes of hell from older magical systems. And essentially, it's a laying out of a philosophy. Some of it very dramatic, and some of it in essays that are very contemporary and very very easily understood. I think his writing style is really communicative, and not highfalutin in any kind of way to put people off. It's really so direct and informed, and he can be tongue in cheek. It's just nice, solid, intelligent writing. And his philosophy, of course, is his own. He formulated Satanism based on his ideas of other free thinkers from the past, people like Ayn Rand, and he was inspired by some, like Mark Twain's ideas of Satan, Byron, literary ideas of Satan, and other free-thinking philosophers that were before him. Nietzsche, of course, in his anti-Christianity was important. So Milton's heroic depiction of Satan, all of these things, all these threads he wove together into a tapestry that is Satanism, and he took full credit for it. He did not try to pretend that this was something handed down from some kind of spiritual authority, because there is no such thing as spiritual authority in Satanism. So, yeah, according to the philosophy, you take full responsibility for your deeds, and so it's fully his baby.
So now, has the church changed much over the years?
Well, not actually. We pretty much keep it the same way it was when Dr. LaVey was alive. We have done things where we had earlier had this kind of social aspect where we had grottos, and that was an idea of locally people would get together to deal with each other. But that really became kind of pointless, especially during the internet age when people can readily communicate with each other. When the grottos were done, finding other Satanists was a very difficult thing, and at times we would put other people who are Satanists and members in touch with each other, but sometimes that was not such a good thing, because just because people share Satanism as a philosophy doesn't mean they're going to share lots of other things in their life. Like somebody might be interested in, travel and airplanes, and somebody else might be interested in flintlock pistols and medieval swords, and they're not going to get along or find common interests. So we don't force people or even encourage people to get together just because they share Satanism. And these days, now that there are easy online communications, people sort of seek their own level. They deal with each other and find shared interests and create projects together. A lot of our members are musicians. We have bands that do things from punk music, oi, blues, weird country, metal, all kinds of things. There's just so much going on amongst our members. They're very creative. We have a number of professional stage magicians in our members, and we also have people who are scientists, who are teachers, who are in law enforcement, who are in the military. We have even elected political officials, which of course is what everybody fears. But yeah, they would of course never tell about their affiliation because the prejudice is out there, and many of our members are really not open about their affiliation simply because the bigotry of most people would destroy their careers. And being a Satanist means being pragmatic. And you don't throw your career away just for Satanism, because Satanism is not a cause. Most religions often are seen that way by their adherents. And in Satanism, each Satanist, is the cause, not Satanism.
Yeah. Well, I think that it would probably be hard to be in a high position in the government and not be out as a Christian.
Well, they all have to claim Christianity to one extent or another, and I think that's a sad thing about our contemporary society, that's still important. Even though they'll be obvious, if you look at the philosophy of people who are elected, they really aren't behaving like Christians. They're not being guided by that. So, we secular folks have to look towards that and go, well, he's claiming to be a Christian, but he's not really acting like one, and good thing, too. Because you really don't want somebody out there thinking that God is telling them what to do when they're trying to make decisions about whether to pass legislation on some topic. You would hope that they'd be rationally taking into consideration all of the ramifications of such legislation, not wondering if God would clap his hands and say, goody, goody.
What's going on with the Muslim and all the unrest and stuff and all that stuff going on. And you hear a lot of people, white, just plain viewing the whole Mideast as Muslim, or but they sort of have that same point of view about North America, being Christian. Well, not being Muslim, but being all Christian. I'm just saying that they'll paint it across. Yet you look at a lot of polls, and probably half the people in America are not Christian.
Oh yeah, well yeah, exactly. I think people are coming out as not being Christian, and these days there was a whole neo-atheism boom, and there are plenty of entertainment figures out there who are very obvious about their non-belief. They don't hide it. In fact, they capitalize on it, and that's really relatively new in history, because you'd look back at people. There was a recent interview with Frank Sinatra that had been posted. It was something he had done for Playboy years ago. And when you look at it these days, he's a really secular guy. He doesn't trust religion at all. And his whole approach was something that we'd consider rather satanic, which of course for us is relevant because Sammy Davis Jr. was a member of the Church of Satan. So we did have an official Rat Pack Satanist Satanist, and we kind of wonder what fascinating conversations he and Frank must have had, because clearly they had some shared philosophical interests.
Wow. That wouldn't have done well for the Rat Pack back in the 60s.
Not to be, well,
public.
on some...
Well, I mean being public, because back in the 60s, there was, it would have been a lot of fear out there. So
yeah,
I would think. So.
Oh yeah. No, and there still is. There still really is. People would. I'm your pediatrician, and by the way, I'm a Satanist. People are going to be like, I'm out of here. That they're not going to want their kids. And the whole point is, being a Satanist, it's a philosophy that says do the best you can. Really learn and push yourself, challenge yourself. So a satanic physician would be somebody who would probably be fairly exemplary. And I know satanic physicians. They do very well. They're important in their field, some of them. So that's how it goes. But we have Satanists who are freedom fighters too. One of our members is well known for actually infiltrating the theocratic cultures of the Middle East and trying to help the young people there have access to the internet so that they can evaluate other ideas than what their governments are feeding to them, so that they can make a choice as to what culture they want to be part of. And this guy risks his life on a regular basis going into these places. He has to go undercover and look like he comes from there. And he could be killed at any point. He's really a freedom fighter, and we think that's just totally tremendous. That's a value for him, that he would like to see this freedom of thought to be spread around the world. Another one of our members is out there trying to gather data about the environment and collect it and put it online for people to have access to without government intervention. He's actually helped with creating devices that can do that can read radiation levels and post it to the internet. And it's incredible. Like, his whole point is that we need to be conscious of how precious and fragile our planet is, and we can't let governments censor that kind of data. People need to know so they can make aware decisions about things that are going on, and that's also something truly amazing. In this day and age, that is something that is important to Satanists. We live in this earth; it's a precious thing to us. Christianity often has this approach that man dominates the animals, and they're completely his tools to do whatever he wants with. And that's really not how we feel. Like, we really see ourselves as animals like all the rest, and that we have a responsibility to this globe to keep it alive and a place that we can enjoy, and not dispose of all the other species through carelessness or idiocy.
Yeah, so you have a real kinship with the other animals. You're not sacrificing them.
Exactly. We pet our pets. We don't kill them.
Well, that's a good thing. I mean, Satanists together.
Well, the thing that we hold in common is our philosophy. And, it's the idea that we are really, if you look at the idea of the universe, we see it as being something that's indifferent to us. Most philosophies have the idea that somehow man is really important in the scheme of things. And we feel that, no, there's a vast universe out there. It's indifferent to us. It doesn't matter whether we're here or not. Life is probably fragile. It may be almost accidental. We don't know yet, but taking that in mind, we then decide that we're the center of our universe. It's a subjective universe, because how could it be otherwise? That's how our consciousnesses work. And because of that, we take the responsibility for ourselves. We don't believe that there are entities out there controlling our lives, supernatural or otherwise. At this point, we haven't seen any evidence of anything. There's no demons, there's no devils, there's no angels, whatever gods you might want to believe in, there really aren't any of those. They're all fictions. So you have to then create a value system, and that is based on the idea that what is good is what benefits you and the things you care about. What's bad for you are the things that hinder you, or the things that you care about. Because all values are subjective human things. They're not somewhere written on a tablet in stone by a deity. And people want to pretend that's the case, that the values that they're promoting have some kind of extra validity, but it's not. And this, I think, as soon as we realize that on a broader sense, that people can then make equitable, rational choices about society and values. But
so you're not really believing in. Okay, so this is a tricky one, but how's then what's your opinion on someone that believed they were possessed, or exorcisms or demons in their house?
Well, we think that's all completely psychological. That some people, I mean, I've watched a number of these films, that people pretend that they're possessed so they can get attention. They're usually folks who were at one point kind of shy, or, they were overlooked. So if you're possessed, anything you do at that point is blamed on the thing possessing you. So you can do all kinds of appalling things and get away with it because it's not your fault. And when you're the center of an exorcism, of course you're center ring in the circus. So I think that the need psychologically is obvious for why people would claim to be possessed. And it may be conscious and it may be unconscious. It may be driven by compulsions that people have because they are really folks that aren't in any way self-realized. And an exorcism could possibly help people if they really believe there's an entity in them. They're nutty enough to think that if somebody's doing a ceremony to drive it out, and if they want to be cured of that, then they could move in that direction. But if the possession is something that is just allowing them to behave badly because that fulfills them on some level, it might be pretty hard to get them exorcised.
They might be enjoying what they're doing.
Well, I'm sure they do on some level. It's a way, because it's almost like a way of finding a freedom. If somebody feels that they're repressed, if you suddenly claim that something else is in control of you, then really all bets are off. You can really do anything, and it's not your fault. So that's not our attitude. We think it's all your fault, and you're going to have to deal with that.
Yeah. And so then, now you've written a book.
Yes, the Satanic Scriptures.
Okay.
I published it in 2006.
And what's that all about?
Well, that book contains it collects a bunch of my essays that I've written over the years, defining Satanism, different aspects of it, applying it to areas beyond what Anton LaVey covered in his writings. And also I cover aesthetic topics. I have a big chapter on music, where I talk about the kind of music I'm interested in, orchestral music by classical composers and romantic composers and film scores. I go into great detail talking about a whole lot of them and give a listening list for people who want to explore that topic. Because as I found over the years dealing with folks, people might like some classical music they've heard, but they really have no handle on how to approach it. So I'm giving them a handle. Here you go. Here's a whole bunch of exciting music that you could listen to, and I say if you then like this, here's where you go. You could run, take it further. It's got a lot of different things. I also have the Satanic Funeral and the Satanic Wedding in there. I composed those rites. The wedding is based on the wedding rite that my wife and I used back in 1981. We had a justice of the peace because there were no satanic priests in our area at the time. But it was, a very secular, self-celebrating wedding, and it became the basis for the one that I published in the book. And the funeral rite I've discussed earlier today about the whole idea of, bringing up the remembrance of the person who's passed. And also something called the Rite of Ragnarok in there. And I had definitely interest in Norse mythology and how it was, again, very humanist. But I had to think that if a Satanist, if somebody had a satanic bent and was under the domination of that religion, where would they take it? And so my Rite of Ragnarok is not meant to celebrate the good Norse deities, all the nice ones that live in Valhalla. It's basically about promoting Loki and all of the dark forces as they rise up to shatter the good gods and clear the way for something new, to create a fresh start. And so psychologically, the ritual is a way of sort of shattering perhaps old limitations and preparing yourself to follow new directions. And it's done using this sort of Norse symbolism. I studied the mythology and used some texts that I altered and adapted from actual Eddas and such. And I think it's a lot of fun.
So do you ever think there'd be a day where Satanists could come out?
Well, the ones who have come out are often in creative fields. There are musicians and artists, and that seems to be the main type of Satanist that gets accepted to the public, because they can sort of see it as a stance of rebellion and as a platform for putting out an alternative point of view. And of course, I have an article on the website where I kind of detail how comedians have been doing funny things with Satanism over the years in sketch comedy and such. And that's actually, it's called Laughing Best's Humorists Take on Satanism, and if you might want to even throw a link in to that somewhere, because that shows sort of a popular bunch of intelligent, popular culture intelligent people sort of making jokes about satanic stereotypes. Often the Satanists said these days, if you have them in an office situation, they're the techies, like they know how things work. And, like that's getting to be kind of the joke about it. There's that show Silicon Valley out there. Yeah. And that has had several Satanists on. There's a main character who's a Satanist, and he's gone to a satanic baptism and such. So they're showing that Satanists can be part of the workforce. Somebody you'd see. I mean, there were sketches on SCTV and other shows like that, Mad TV, where they had Satanists. So it will happen. That on what was it, Futurama, Dr. Zoidberg got run over at one point, and before he passed away, he said, I claim the right to a satanic funeral. And, Bart Simpson writes on the blackboard at one point, he's being made to write things. The Pledge of Allegiance doesn't end with Hail Satan. So it's, we're getting out there into the consciousness of the popular culture. And as that keeps going, I think then it will be a time for Satanists to essentially come out in that sense. I think, as I said before, the idea of characters who are Satanists, but not the horror movie type, but who are actual Satanists, who are rational, intelligent, sort of iconoclastic people who might be the problem solvers, who might be the creative ones. If we have fictional characters that are depicted like that based on the reality of what many Satanists are, then I think that the public could be more comfortable with accepting our alternative take on how to live as a human being.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, we're coming to the end. What websites or what would you like to give out for information for people that want to contact you?
Well, our website is churchofsatan.com. That's the place to go. There's a great deal of information there. There's a lot of essays, and there's video links, and there's just it's the place to go to learn about Satanism. You can understand all the different aspects of it. We have a news feed there that shows what our members are doing, and you'll see band performances and magic performances, all kinds of things like that our folks are doing. And you'll also find we have a thing called Third Side Intelligence, where we do commentary about things happening in daily news issues. Might not be daily, but something that we would say a Satanist could give a third side perspective, because we say that usually things are, it's black or white, it's one or the other. And we try to come up with a third point of view that will take aspects of each and come up with a different synthesis. So that's an interesting feed for people who want to see our satanic thought about contemporary issues.
Okay. Oh, actually, that brings up one thing I didn't get to and that I'd love to know. So what does it take for someone to join?
Oh, it's very easy. There's an application form that you fill out, and it costs $200 for lifetime membership. And then we have a more extensive questionnaire to fill out, which is for active application, and that really is meant to be a self-portrait on paper for people to give to us. And then it's what you do. We consider the Church of Satan kind of a something that you drive yourself. Like there's nothing required of you. Once you join, you can get your red card and be a member and not have any interaction whatsoever. Or you could start dealing with other people in the Church of Satan and creating friendships and making creative projects, having fun. It's in your hands, essentially. Once you join the Church of Satan, you don't get a hearse full of hooded robe people coming to take you off to the midnight orgy, as much as some people might be looking for that. Sorry to disappoint you. That's not going to be what happens. But the red card is kind of a key, and when you meet other Satanists and they know that you're a member, they have more respect for you and may open up to you and befriend you. And finding people to enrich your life is always a good thing, we think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's good. Well, thank you very much for joining us on air tonight. And God, we should do it again.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always willing to keep a good conversation going, and this has been a splendid one.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for taking the time.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
Show is over for now. Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of the Z-Talk Radio Network.
I'll be back.